They say the devil's in the details, but I always thought details were my strong suit. I mean, I'm the guy who remembers anniversaries, checks the gas meter before a road trip, and can quote most of The Godfather from memory. So how the hell did I miss this? It started innocently enough, like most disasters, I suppose. Lying on the couch after dinner, I reached for my phone to check tomorrow's weather. Except my phone wasn't there. It was still on the kitchen counter, probably charging next to Liana's. No big deal. I strolled into the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and, on a whim, picked up hers too. It wasn't snooping, it was efficiency. She always left it around unlocked anyway, and I thought I'd plug it in while I was at it. That's when I saw it. The screen had lit up with a notification. Nothing strange at first, just a gallery app alert. But instead of the usual "your storage is full" nonsense, it said, "New album created, Fire Lingerie Favorites Fire." I paused, my thumb hovering over the screen. Now, I'm not a nosy guy by nature, but come on. Tell me you wouldn't be curious. So I tapped. And there they were. A dozen high-resolution photos of my wife, Liana, in lingerie that I didn't even know she owned. Each shot was perfectly framed, the lighting soft and flattering. She looked stunning. Sexy. Confident. But here's the kicker, these weren't for me. I'd never seen these photos before. Not in my inbox, not on my phone, not taped to my damn bathroom mirror. Which begged the question, who were they for? My chest tightened as I scrolled through the images, each one more suggestive than the last. There was something about the way she smiled, just a little too coy, a little too knowing, that sent my mind into a tailspin. "Mike, you okay?" I jumped, nearly dropping the phone. Liana stood in the doorway, holding a bowl of popcorn, her hair tied back in that casual way that made her look effortlessly gorgeous. Yeah," I said, quickly locking the screen and setting her phone back down. "Just checking the battery." She laughed, completely oblivious. "You and your gadgets. Come on, the movie's starting." I followed her back to the living room, but I might as well have been on another planet. My mind was stuck on those photos, the questions swirling like a storm. Was it just a random self-confidence boost? A spur-of-the-moment thing? Or was there more to it? Liana settled onto the couch next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. "You're so quiet," she murmured. "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. But tired didn't even begin to cover it. Because for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't sure I knew my wife as well as I thought I did. And that single thought scared the hell out of me. I spent the next few days bouncing between two extremes, convincing myself I was overreacting and wondering if my entire marriage was built on a lie. Let me tell you, neither is a comfortable place to live. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Liana was her usual self, cheerful, witty, making little jokes that somehow always landed. If she sensed anything was off with me, she didn't let on. Or maybe she was just that good at hiding things. And that's where the doubt came in. It wasn't like she was acting suspicious. Her phone still lay casually on the coffee table or kitchen counter, unlocked, ready for anyone to grab. She didn't whisper into it or leave the room to take calls. She wasn't suddenly dressing up to go out or staying out late. No, everything was perfectly ordinary. But that was the problem. It was too ordinary. I found myself analyzing every little thing. The way she hummed while doing dishes, was it always that happy? The way she laughed at my jokes, was it forced? The way she adjusted her hair when she thought I wasn't looking, was that a tell? It was maddening. One night, I sat in bed scrolling through Reddit while Liana watched some home renovation show. "Can you believe this guy painted his cabinets lime green?" she said, laughing. "Crazy," I muttered, barely registering her words. She glanced at me. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about work." She didn't press, which somehow made me feel even worse. If she was hiding something, she wasn't doing it out of malice. And if she wasn't hiding anything, then I was just turning into some paranoid maniac. But then, late one night, something snapped. I was sitting in my car outside the house, engine off, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Earlier that day, I'd installed a GPS tracker in Liana's car. It was a stupid, impulsive move, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know what she was doing when I wasn't around. Was it an invasion of privacy? Absolutely. Did I feel guilty about it? Sure. Did I care enough to stop myself? Not a chance. The thing is, nothing about her behavior suggested she was unfaithful. That was the part that messed with my head. It was the photos, the one thing I couldn't explain, couldn't shake. If there was nothing going on, then why did they exist? I didn't want to be the guy who spies on his wife. But I also didn't want to be the guy who misses all the signs and ends up as the punchline to some neighborhood gossip. I had to know. As I climbed out of the car and headed inside, I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I was just gathering information. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find out there was nothing to worry about. Or maybe, I thought bitterly as I closed the door behind me, I'd open Pandora's box and regret it forever. It all came to a head on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I'd taken the day off under the pretense of needing a mental health day, though the irony wasn't lost on me. If anything, my mental health was spiraling faster than a drunk at a wedding. I sat in my car a block away from our house, watching as the rain drizzled down the windshield. Liana's car was in the driveway, as usual. The GPS tracker hadn't revealed anything suspicious, she hadn't gone anywhere out of the ordinary. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe I'd built this whole narrative in my head because of one damn notification. I started the engine, ready to drive off and put this madness behind me. Then I saw it. Through the faint blur of the rain, I noticed something odd, a soft glow from the living room window. It wasn't the TV, it was too bright, too steady. My stomach twisted. I turned off the car and stepped into the rain, my jacket doing little to keep me dry as I approached the house. The faint hum of voices reached my ears as I climbed the porch steps. One voice was unmistakably Liana's, warm, playful, with that teasing lilt she used when she wanted something. But the other voices were strange. Multiple, layered, indistinct. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside, closing it quietly behind me. The voices grew clearer now, accompanied by a faint chime of digital notifications. My pulse quickened as I moved down the hall toward the living room. And then I saw her. Liana sat on the couch, bathed in the glow of her laptop screen. She was wearing lingerie, delicate, lacy, and far more revealing than anything I'd ever seen her in. Her hair was loose, framing her face like a halo, and her smile was radiant, practiced. On the laptop screen, a live chat scrolled by in a frenzy of comments. "Damn, you're gorgeous. Take my money, queen. How about some red tonight? I'll tip extra." The camera perched on the coffee table captured every angle, every movement. I froze. For a second, I thought I might be hallucinating. Maybe I'd finally snapped, and this was some elaborate fever dream. But no, it was real. The glow of the screen, the hum of the notifications, the way Liana laughed and leaned toward the camera, it was all real. And then she saw me. Her smile faltered, her eyes widening as the color drained from her face. "Mike," she gasped, scrambling to pause the stream. The screen went dark, the chat disappearing in an instant. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Liana stood, clutching the edge of her robe like a lifeline. "I can explain." "Oh, I'd love to hear it," I snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife has a second career she forgot to mention." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "It's not what you think," she said weakly. I let out a bitter laugh. "Not what I think. Liana, I just walked in on you hosting the world's least exclusive strip show. What exactly am I supposed to think?" Her cheeks flushed, whether from shame or anger, I couldn't tell. "It's not like that," she said, her voice trembling. "It's just a job. That's all. A job? I repeated, incredulous. You call this a job? She took a step closer, her hands outstretched as if to calm me. Mike, listen. It started as a joke, okay? Just something silly. But then, people started tipping. A lot. And it was easy money. I didn't think it was a big deal. Not a big deal? I echoed, my voice rising. You're parading around half-naked for strangers, and it's not a big deal? Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. I just wanted to help. The bills have been piling up, and I thought. You thought this was the solution? I interrupted, gesturing wildly at the laptop. Jesus, Liana. How long has this been going on? She hesitated. A few months, she admitted. But Mike, I swear, it's just online. It's nothing physical. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then my eyes landed on her phone, lying on the coffee table. Without thinking, I grabbed it and unlocked it. The first thing I saw was a text thread with someone named John. Can't wait for the next show, beautiful. Last week was amazing. You're worth every penny. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. Who the hell is John? Her face turned pale. He's a client, she said quietly. A client, I repeated, my voice cold. And what exactly does he mean by last week was amazing? Care to explain that? Her silence said more than any words could. In that moment, I felt the foundation of my world crack beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, about our marriage, was suddenly in question. And the worst part? I didn't know if I wanted to stay and fix it, or walk away for good. I sat there, staring at the screen, the name John glowing like a beacon of betrayal. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. It wasn't just the photos anymore, or the lingerie, or even the live-streamed performances, it was this. A man, real and tangible, calling her beautiful and reminiscing about something that happened last week. I turned the phone toward her, my voice low but sharp. Explain. Now. Liana looked like a deer caught in headlights. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaky. Mike, it's not what you think. Don't, I cut her off. Don't tell me it's not what I think. He said last week was amazing. What the hell does that mean? She swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she reached for the phone. He's just one of my top donators, she said, her tone pleading. He tips a lot, and sometimes he asks for extra attention. Extra attention, I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. And by extra attention, you mean? Her cheeks flushed, and she averted her gaze. Messages. Private chats. That's all, I swear. And what about last week? Was that just a really great chat session? She flinched at my words, her eyes filling with tears. He asked for a private stream, she admitted. Just me and him. He paid a lot for it, Mike. More than I've ever made in one session. I felt my stomach churn. And you thought that was okay? To let some guy pay for a private show of my wife? It's not like that, she cried, her voice breaking. It's just work. I'm not meeting him, I'm not touching him. It's all online. It's harmless. Harmless? I snapped, standing up so abruptly the chair scraped against the floor. You think this is harmless? Liana, you're letting some stranger pay to see you like that. You're selling parts of yourself, parts that are supposed to be mine. She stood too, her eyes desperate as she stepped toward me. I'm trying to help us, she said, her voice rising. Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think I love sitting in front of a camera, pretending to be someone I'm not? I did it for us, Mike. The mortgage, the credit cards, all of it, it's piling up, and you're always so stressed about money. I thought this would take the pressure off. I let out a bitter laugh. So you decided to solve our problems by turning our marriage into a sideshow? That's your solution? Her tears spilled over now, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. You weren't supposed to find out, she said softly. I was just trying to help. I stared at her, my anger mixing with something else, confusion, maybe even guilt. Was she really doing this for us, or was that just an excuse? And if she was, did that make it better? What about John? I asked after a long silence. What else haven't you told me? Nothing, she said quickly. I swear. He's just a client, Mike. I've never met him, never even talked to him outside the platform. It's all online. That's all it is. Her words sounded genuine, but trust is a funny thing. Once it's cracked, it doesn't mend easily. I paced the room, running a hand through my hair. Do you even understand what this looks like? I said finally. To me, to anyone else? You're married, Liana. You're my wife. And now I find out you're doing this behind my back? She stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. I'm still your wife, Mike. I've never stopped being your wife. I love you, and I never wanted to hurt you. This was just a stupid decision. A way to help without asking for help. I see how hard you work, and I thought I could take some of the weight off. I wanted to yell, to storm out, to slam the door behind me and leave her to deal with this mess on her own. But instead, I just stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew. You should have told me, I said quietly, my voice breaking the tension in the room. She nodded, her tears falling freely now. I know. I know I should have. And I'm sorry, Mike. For everything. For the lies, for the secrets. For making you feel like I don't trust you. I just didn't know how to tell you. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint patter of rain against the windows. My mind was spinning, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, betrayal, and something I couldn't quite name. Finally, I let out a long breath and looked her in the eye. We're not done talking about this, I said. Not by a long shot. But right now, I need some air. She nodded, not trying to stop me as I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. As I stepped into the rain, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. My wife, my marriage, my sense of stability, it was all teetering on the edge of something I didn't understand. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I could pull it back. The next day, I woke up on my brother's couch with a stiff neck and a head full of questions. It had been a restless night, tossing and turning as my brain replayed every detail of the past few days. No matter how I spun it, I couldn't shake the image of Liana, bathed in that laptop glow, telling me she was doing it for us. By mid-morning, I was back home. The tension in the house hit me the second I stepped inside. Liana was in the kitchen, pretending to organize the spice rack. When she heard the door close, she turned, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. Mike, she said softly, her voice hesitant. I held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Let's just sit down, I said. Talk. All of it. No excuses, no dodging. I want the truth, Liana. She nodded, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd laughed over bad takeout and planned vacations that always seemed just out of reach. Now it felt like neutral ground in a battle neither of us wanted to fight. I don't even know where to start, she began, twisting her hands nervously. How about with John? I said, leaning back in my chair, my tone sharper than I intended. Her eyes flicked to mine, guilt etched into every line of her face. He's just a client, she said. A big spender. He tips more than anyone else. That's it. I folded my arms. And the messages? Last week was amazing. What the hell was that about? She swallowed hard. He paid for a private stream, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a little more personal than the usual stuff. But that's all it was, Mike. I swear to you. I've never met him. I've never even talked to him off the platform. I studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. But all I saw was exhaustion. And regret. This isn't just about John, I said finally. This is about all of it. The photos, the streams, the lies. Why, Liana? Why would you do this? Were things really that bad? Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. No. Things weren't bad. But I saw how hard you were working, Mike. How stressed you were, trying to keep us afloat. And I felt useless. Like I wasn't pulling my weight. So you decided to start a side hustle as a cam girl? I shot back, the sarcasm cutting through my voice. She flinched but didn't look away. I didn't think it would get this far, she said. At first, it was just a joke. Something silly. But then people started tipping. Real money. And I thought, maybe I could help. Pay down some of the credit cards. Put a dent in the mortgage. It felt harmless. Harmless, I repeated, shaking my head. Liana, do you even understand how this looks? How it feels to me? She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine. I do, she said quietly. And I hate that I hurt you. That I broke your trust. But Mike, I swear to you, it was never about replacing you or betraying you. It was just money. That's all it ever was. I stared at her hand, hovering just inches away from mine. Part of me wanted to pull away, to hold on to the anger that had carried me this far. But another part, the part that still loved her, still saw the woman I married, wanted to believe her. Finally, I let out a long breath and leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. I need to know one thing, I said. Are you done with this? The streams, the photos, all of it. Is it over? She nodded emphatically, tears streaming down her face. Yes. I'll delete everything. The account, the photos, everything. I'll never do it again, Mike. I promise. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint patter of rain against the windows. Finally, I reached out and took her hand in mine. Okay, I said softly. We'll try to move past this. But it's going to take time, Liana. Trust doesn't just snap back into place. She nodded, squeezing my hand tightly. I'll do whatever it takes, she said. I just want us to be okay. I wanted that too. More than anything. But as we sat there, holding hands across the table, I knew that things would never quite be the same. And maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe this was our chance to rebuild, stronger and more honest than before. For now, it was enough. The days that followed were awkward, to say the least. There's no guidebook for how to navigate a situation where your wife's secret side hustle as an online temptress comes crashing into your otherwise ordinary marriage. Liana kept her promise. By the end of the first day, the account was gone, the photos deleted, and the laptop wiped clean. She even insisted on showing me everything, every folder, every backup drive, like some kind of tech confessional. I want to be transparent, she said, handing me her phone as if it were a peace offering. I didn't scroll through it. Not because I trusted her completely yet, but because I didn't want to turn into someone who needed to. That wasn't the kind of husband I wanted to be. Still, the silence between us felt heavier than usual. At dinner, I'd find myself staring at her, wondering if I'd missed other signs. At night, I'd lie awake, thinking about those messages from John and the way she'd smiled for the camera. But slowly, things started to shift. One evening, I came home to find Liana in the kitchen, a cookbook open in front of her and flour dusting her apron. I thought I'd try making that lasagna you like, she said, smiling sheepishly. I raised an eyebrow. You hate cooking. Consider it reparations, she quipped, her tone light but tinged with guilt. I couldn't help but laugh. If this is how you make amends, I might need to get mad at you more often. She threw a bit of flour at me, and for the first time in days, things felt normal again, or at least closer to it. Over the next few weeks, we talked more than we had in years. Real talks, not just the surface level "how was your day" exchanges we'd grown used to. She told me about how the streaming had started, how it had felt exciting at first, like a harmless game. And then the money started coming in, she said, her voice quieter. It felt like I was finally contributing, like I wasn't just sitting around while you worked so hard. You know, I never thought of you like that, I said, frowning. I know, she replied, her eyes meeting mine. But I did. That hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't that she didn't love me, or that she wanted someone else. She'd been struggling with her own insecurities, and instead of coming to me, she'd tried to fix them herself, in the worst way possible. I should have told you, she said, her voice breaking. I know that now. I didn't want you to think less of me. I reached across the table and took her hand. Liana, you're an idiot, I said with a smirk. But you're my idiot. And as much as I want to strangle you for putting us through this, I'm not going anywhere. Her laugh was shaky, but genuine. Lucky me. We still had a lot to figure out. Trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight, and there were moments, like when her phone buzzed or I caught her looking guilty, that the doubt crept back in. But we worked through it, piece by piece. She started talking more about her feelings, about how being a housewife didn't feel fulfilling, about how she missed having a sense of purpose. I realized I'd been so caught up in work that I hadn't noticed how much she was struggling. We need to be a team again, I said one night, as we sat on the couch sharing a bowl of popcorn. We do, she agreed, leaning her head on my shoulder. No more secrets. No more side hustles. Unless it's selling my old baseball cards, I joked. I hear those are worth a fortune. Her laughter filled the room, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like we were on solid ground again. The incident had shaken us, no doubt about it. But as we navigated the aftermath, I started to realize something important. This wasn't just a wake-up call for her. It was one for me, too. We'd both let things slip, her in trying to find her footing, me in not noticing how much she needed my support. If we were going to make it, we had to rebuild together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we could. It was a Saturday morning when I realized things were finally starting to feel right again. Not perfect, mind you, trust doesn't snap back into place like a rubber band, but there was a sense of calm in the air. Liana stood in the kitchen, humming to herself as she flipped pancakes. She wore one of my old t-shirts, her hair piled messily on top of her head. It was the kind of moment that felt ordinary, yet precious. Pancakes for breakfast? I teased, pouring myself a cup of coffee. What's the occasion? She glanced over her shoulder, a playful smile tugging at her lips. Do I need an occasion to spoil my husband? Consider it part of my rebranding. I laughed, shaking my head as I leaned against the counter. Well, as long as this rebranding doesn't involve any surprise career changes, I'm all for it. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't look away. No more surprises, she said softly. I promise. I nodded, taking a sip of coffee. Good. Because I'm not sure my heart can take another plot twist. Later that afternoon, we sat together in the living room, sorting through some old boxes we'd been meaning to tackle for months. Liana found a photo album, and we spent an hour flipping through pictures from our early days, our first apartment, awkward selfies from vacations, and the day we bought the house. God, we were so young, she said, laughing at a photo of us covered in paint after attempting to redecorate our bedroom. You mean I was young, I corrected. You were a mature, sophisticated woman who convinced me lime green was a good idea for walls. She rolled her eyes but smiled. Hey, we've come a long way. I set the album aside and looked at her. We have, I said quietly. She met my gaze, her expression serious for a moment. Mike. I know I screwed up. Big time. But I want you to know how much I appreciate you sticking with me. I don't deserve it. I reached over and took her hand. Maybe not, I said, my tone light but sincere. But lucky for you, I'm a sucker for redemption arcs. Her laughter was soft but genuine, and she leaned in to kiss me. As the evening wore on, I found myself thinking about the past few weeks, about the betrayal, the anger, the rebuilding. It hadn't been easy, and there were still moments when the doubt crept in, whispering questions I wasn't ready to answer. But as I watched Liana curled up next to me on the couch, laughing at some ridiculous comedy we'd seen a dozen times, I realized something important. We were stronger now, not because we'd ignored what happened, but because we'd faced it head-on. We'd torn everything down to the foundation and started building again, brick by brick. "Hey," I said, nudging her gently. She looked up at me, her eyes curious. "I think we're going to be okay," I said. Her smile was small but radiant. "I think so too." That night, as we lay in bed, I found myself smiling in the dark. Things weren't perfect, and they probably never would be. But they were ours. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Subscribe to never miss a new story and discover even more captivating tales.